You're ready. You're ready. You are ready. Hey everyone, I'm glad you stopped by today. Let's talk about larkspur for a few minutes. Larkspur is the annual equivalent to delphinium. If you've ever grown perennial delphinium, larkspur is the annual version of that. Delphinium grows up from the root and grows from the plant, whereas larkspur you would sow from seed. And you can sow delphinium by seed, but it's a perennial. And for me, the delphinium only comes back like 2 years, and then it's pretty much done. The larkspur in my zone 6B, it grows the best if I sow it in the autumn time. So I sow it about 8 weeks before my first frost date, and the plants get teeny tiny, about, a couple inches big, and then they overwinter and start putting on growth as soon as the spring starts arriving. And you can see larkspur can get much taller than what you're seeing here. This container is about, it's more than a foot. I would say it's about 14 inches deep, something like that. The variety that you're seeing here are all the blue, although there is a stray white one and a stray lavender one and another stray lavender one in here, but it's all the blue larkspur. And my good friend and gardening buddy, we were talking about a month and a half or so, a little bit more ago, and she reminded me of how toxic larkspur is. And I think I knew that, but I think I pushed it in the back of my mind because I love the cottage feel of larkspur. Now, I'll tell you in just a minute what we're going to do with this larkspur, but when she reminded me of how toxic every part of the plant, blooms, the foliage, every part of the plant of larkspur is highly toxic. And it's toxic. It can be irritating to the skin. That's why I have on my UV sleeves and my gloves today. It can be highly irritating to the skin. A human, if it's ingested by a human, 2 milligrams of it can cause almost fatal illness. So that's not very much. That shows you how highly toxic this plant is. For cattle, it's extremely toxic as well. If they eat, it takes about 5 pounds for them to ingest. They will die. It will kill cattle. So when she reminded me of how toxic this plant is, and I have some larkspur in some other places, and I've grown it. This is maybe the third year, I think, that I've grown larkspur. When she reminded me about how highly toxic it is, my first impulse was to come out and rip it all out and burn it, and just really, make sure that there were no seeds that were going to spread anywhere, because we raise cattle here on the farm. For that very reason, I do not grow foxglove, and I never have, because it's highly toxic to cattle, as well as milkweed. Milkweed is highly toxic to bovine. But our farm is covered in milkweed. Our cattle actually eat the milkweed. They strip the leaves completely. And my son-in-law and I were talking, and he said they would have to ingest so much of the milkweed in order for it to actually kill them. There's no way we can control the milkweed on the farm. It's a blessing and a curse, really, to have it here on the farm, because we love it for the monarch butterflies and butterflies. But anyway, that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about larkspur. So back to my story. My first impulse was to come out and just rip out all the larkspur. But after I slept on it for a day or two and thought about it for a day or two, I thought, okay, I'm going to be completely responsible for my larkspur. I think last year I may have put it in 1 or 2 bouquets to give away, but no longer am I going to be putting it in giveaway bouquets. I'm always going to wear gloves and protection so that my skin doesn't get irritated. We don't have any dogs or cats here, so that's good. My grandchildren know not to eat any plant or anything like this. They know what plants are edible. So we teach them, and we are responsible in that way. And if I feel like I want to continue to grow larkspur, which I kind of do because I just love the cottage look, I am only going to use it for drying. And as a nursery grower that I was talking to about it reminded me, he said, just don't let it go to seed. And that's a little bit hard to do because I have some behind my greenhouse that has self-seeded itself, and it's like way tall. We might take a look at that in a minute. Hi. There's a bird up on the comb of the roof singing. So what I'm going to be using with my larkspur for is drying. So this will be the first year that I have dried larkspur, and I'm going to hydrate it for 24 hours. So I have a bucket of just room temperature water, and I'm going to hydrate the larkspur for 24 hours, and then I'm going to hang it upside down to dry in my garden shed. So that's what I'm going to be doing with my larkspur. You might even be saying to yourself, or to me where I can't hear you through the camera, what's the point then? Why even grow it if it is so dangerous and so toxic? And you're probably right. You could be right. I don't know. I want to see how it dries. I know that other people do dry it, and it dries well. So I just want to see what it will do and if it's worth it. And obviously when it's dried, I'm probably going to have to handle it with gloves as well. And another thing is I want to make sure that I don't put the foliage where the cattle may eat it even after it's dried, the foliage that I strip off. So my compost pile is where the cattle can get to it. So I'm going to have to put it in another spot where I know the cattle don't graze and don't go. So I'm going to strip the leaves. Here you can see how nice and sturdy the stems of larkspur is. When you are harvesting larkspur, even to dry, you don't want it to be too aged. So I'm going to bring it a little closer to the camera so you can see the top blooms here are not quite open. That's really the best stage to harvest larkspur. And if you harvest it much older than that, it may not dry real well, and the blooms may fall off when you're drying it. Here we go as an example of a couple of side shoots here, and those I'm going to forfeit here. But the blooms are completely open on the stalk, so we'll see how long they last, how they hold up for drying. Hopefully it will hold up. Even though larkspur looks like a very delicate flower, the stems are very sturdy on these, and I like that. And as I said earlier, larkspur will sometimes self-seed itself. So you just want to be aware of these things concerning larkspur. And I did not really research it a lot, but I'm assuming delphinium is just as toxic. I really don't know for sure. My only concern about them going to seed is if the seeds blow into our fields. This field right next to us here is one of the cattle grazing fields. I've never seen it do that in any of the fields in 3 years I've been growing it. And you want to strip all the leaves off. They don't dry. They don't dry very well. So strip all the foliage off. I think that's all we can glean now, but we have quite a few stems left that we can get some off of. So I think what we'll do is I will let these hydrate, and then I'll pick up and film just how I dry them very simply. All right, we'll see you in a day or so. Okay, so it's the next day. This larkspur has been hydrating. It's been in my house, not out here in my dried flower shed, because it's a little bit warm in here. So we will hang it up to dry and see how it does. It's just been losing a few petals, not bad. I will give an update, probably most likely on Instagram, of how it's drying. So you can find me on Instagram. I will put the name of my Instagram account in the description below. It's country_garden girl. So you can find me on Instagram. And I should have brought some snips in here. I usually keep a pair, but I'm going to go ahead and just maybe with these scissors, whoops, and send everything flying everywhere. I'm trying to keep this part short, so if I skip over a little bit, so the video won't get too long, then you'll know what I'm doing. I'm going to bunch all of the longer stems together, and then there's a couple of shorter stems, so I do have my gloves on again while we're handling the larkspur today. So please weigh in your opinion and your thoughts and anything you know about larkspur and the poison level, toxic level of larkspur, and what you've experienced and what you think about what we've talked about in this video. So I think this will be my first bunch here, and then we'll bunch up that second bunch. So I'm going to take a rubber band and I'm going to just go as tightly as I can. It's kind of hard working with gloves, but necessary with the larkspur. As I've thought more about it, as the 24 hours have gone on, I don't know. I'm back on the fence about whether I'm going to continue to grow larkspur, and just wondering, is it worth it? So I really love it. I really do. So I'm cutting a piece of twine, and this is just jute twine. You can buy it at, big box stores, whatever. I always do a rubber band first because I cannot get my twine tight enough. Once the stems start drying, then they shrink. And then the next thing you know, you come in and wherever you're drying your flowers, and you have dried flowers or halfway dried flowers or whatever laying all over the floor. So then you just pull your jute just tightly as you can and tie it here. And like I said, it's really hard to do with gloves on. So there we go. So it's ready. We're going to hang it upside down, and I'm just going to hang it here on these dowels or whatever they're called for now. And so I'm going to make a loop here if I can. Just a little slip knot, maybe. Boy, you realize how hard it is to do things with gloves on. And we're just going to hang it here at the end and let it dry. Everything you see behind me is dried from last year. So that we're hoping. So we have this shorter one that's losing some of its petals, but what I think I'm going to do is make all of these shorter to match that one, because we have a couple more shorter ones. And you don't need to worry about cutting at an angle like you would if you're doing a bouquet when you're drying flowers. You don't need to worry about, because you're not worried about them taking up any more water or anything. You don't need them to do that. Whoops, I think that one flew through to the camera. Oh, I have a rubber band already. I really don't want to spill that water, which would not be unusual for me to do. Okay, and we're just going with the rubber band as tightly as we can. I think I can get one more, maybe. Yep. Okay, so now we're just going to put our piece of twine . Whoops, lost my slip knot there. I'm gonna have to take my gloves off for this. It won't hurt since I'm only touching the twine. All right. Got a little slip knot. Put that there, and voila. Dry, dry, babies. All right, guys, well, that's it. And like I said, please weigh in your thoughts about Larkspur. And if you have any, whoops, I was getting ready to touch the pedal. If you have any thoughts or any knowledge about it, I'd love to hear it. Thanks so much for watching, and we will see you in the next video. Happy gardening.